As always, thank you for breathing with me before we get started with this. Really helps to center me and get us all on the same page. So today we're going to talk about prayer, which might seem like kind of a no-duh. You're at a spiritual center. First, we're going to talk about prayer. And you're right, we do. We talk about prayer a lot in this center. However, for some of you who are new to us or who've not taken classes with us, you may not recognize it when we're talking about prayer because we call it something different. In our teaching, we call prayer spiritual mind treatment. And it is different than the kinds of traditional prayers that most of us were raised with. So what I'm going to do today is that I'm going to explain a little bit about what some of the differences are. And then I'm going to share a couple of stories with you about the effectiveness of our kind of prayer, spiritual mind treatment. Now, don't get me wrong before you start to get riled or something. All prayer is good. You get me? All prayer is good. All prayer is effective. All prayer is powerful. Let's face it, any time that we devote ourselves, that we sync our minds with the divine, whatever we want to call it, anytime we spend communing with the source of our being, something happens. You understand what I'm saying? Something happens anytime. It can't help it because everything's made out of energy. Everything's made out of energy, and that energy moves according to our thoughts. And so when we are thinking from a place of communion with the divine, whether it is bowing or asking or prostrate on the ground, or sitting in a lotus position, or bowing 5 times a day to the east, or using our rosary beads or mala beads, or looking up in prayer, or simply connecting, however we do it, we are opening ourselves up to that divine energy to move through us. Yes? Yes, okay. So here is one of the basic differences, though, with more traditional kind of prayer, is that the one who is praying in many of these, let me go back to them, in practically all of these, the one who is praying is basically beseeching or imploring the God of their understanding to intercede on their behalf. Therefore, their mindset going into the prayer is one of separation and subservience. I'm not worthy, right? So they are asking a supreme something out there to do something for them. However, sometimes, especially with some of the really more traditional faith traditions, is that the guy that they are praying to is the guy from the Old Testament, right? And that guy's usually pissed off, isn't he? That guy's grumpy, and he's angry, and he's too busy, and he doesn't care. So what happens is when you open your heart to that, and it's an angry God or something like that, it perpetuates this idea of separateness and unworthiness. Now, not always, of course. Many other traditions have adopted a kinder, more loving God that is there for comfort and guidance. And yet that God is still separate from the one praying. There's him up here, and there's lowly me down here. Yeah? So that's probably the biggest difference between traditional prayer and spiritual mind treatment. And by the way, I realize that name, spiritual mind treatment, is a little odd and it can be a little off-putting. But I'm going to explain it to you in just a moment, and then it's not going to seem odd or off-putting at all. But I have to kind of lay one more piece of groundwork before I do that, okay? You willing? Yeah? Are you guys with me? Okay, so one of the basics of our teaching is that God, or whatever you want to call that life force energy that is everywhere in everything, is exactly that. That life force energy is in everything, which means it is in us. There is no separation between us and it. We are part of it as opposed to apart from it. Does that make sense? I kept that line in because it really spoke to me. We are part of it. We are not apart from it. So when we pray, we do not beg, we do not beseech, we do not plead, we do not implore. Instead, we're coming from this open-hearted place of unity with the understanding that this divine energy is responding to us and responding to our thoughts. So instead of begging and pleading and imploring, instead, we affirm, we claim, we declare, like Scarlett O'Hara, I declare. We accept. We invite. We know. If you listen to Reverend Marjorie's treatment, she said, I know, da-da-da-da-da. I claim, da-da-da-da-da. She didn't say, well, if you could maybe find it to make this a good Sunday. Nothing like that. She claimed it. So instead of asking God to do something for us or to us, we are allowing it to work through us as us. So Ernest Holmes, our founder, had a couple of things to say about this. He had lots to say about this. Let me tell you, distilling 30 years of work on understanding prayer into a 20-minute talk has been a challenge. So you're getting the highlights, folks. There's a lot more to it. Anyway, here's what Ernest Holmes said. We cannot doubt that the Spirit has already made the gift of life since we live. Ours is the privilege of acceptance. This should be done simply and directly. To pray in spirit and in truth means to recognize this indwelling spirit and to declare the truth about its activity through us. So we claim our truth. We state our truth, and that is one of the basic differences between traditional prayer and spiritual mind treatment. So instead of separateness and asking for help, we are affirming our oneness. Ernest Holmes had one more thing. I couldn't not include this one too. In spiritual mind treatment, there should always be a recognition of the absolute unity of God and man. Man is in God, and God is man, just as a drop of water is in the ocean, while the ocean is the drop of water. Go yowza! Yowza! To contemplate that divine life, which is at the very center of every man's life, is the very essence of spiritual healing. I know, go like that. See, my ministers, they know. So, about that name, spiritual mind treatment. How many were weirded out the first time you heard that? Yeah, I know. How many of your family are really weirded out when they first heard that? Yeah, okay. It's actually very simple, and it's not at all weird. Spiritual. Okay? Spiritual means has something to do with spirit, spiritual energy. Mind, meaning that it is about using our mind to affirm the result that we want. Spiritual mind. Then the word treatment. Okay, that is a little complicated. So back in the day, when that term was first started being used by our kissing cousins, don't get freaked out, the Christian scientists, we are kissing cousins. Distant kissing cousins. Thank you, darling. So back in the day, that term was being used, and here's what would happen is that people, I'm talking like the 1850s, something like that, they would either see their doctor to treat their illness, or they would see a mental or spiritual healer to treat them. They were being treated. Spiritual, having to do with spirit. Mind, having to do with the mind. Treatment, just like you go to your doctor to treat, so does your minister or your practitioner. And that's where the phrase comes from. Isn't that interesting? Everybody go like this. It's not weird at all, is it? No. And the good news is you too can learn to do spiritual mind treatment for yourself. Because, you hear me talk all the time about our accredited classes, particularly our foundations class, where we spend a lot of time learning the art and science of spiritual mind treatment. Science, you may ask? Yes, science. Because when we are doing our treatment, we are utilizing consciously, on purpose, we are utilizing the universal law of cause and effect, and that is what we give out is what we receive back. It is a law. It is a divine law. It is also a physical law. We are using that physical law and that spiritual law, the law of cause and effect, to make our treatments effective. So this law responds to our thoughts. Anybody study quantum physics? I'm hopeless at it, but I do understand that this stuff that's all around us is just doing like this until we put our focus on it, and then it becomes. Yes? Did I say that sort of right? Okay, so when we do our spiritual mind treatment, that is exactly what we are doing. We are using this, we are getting all the things together, using spirit and our mind and treatment. So it is scientific. It is scientific. God, I wore myself out on that one. So modern day spiritual mind treatment consists of 5 different steps. Now, I know many of you know this, but we can all use a refresher, correct? Okay, those 5 steps are recognition, recognizing that God is all there is. Or whatever you choose to call God. You could call God the cosmic muffin. You understand? The energy doesn't care. It's not like, oh, you called me the wrong name. No, call it whatever you will. Then the second step is unification, which is unifying in our own minds that we are one with this divine source. The realization, which is stating what we want our outcome to be in positive and affirming language. The 4th step is thanksgiving. I give thanks for this truth. Not I'm giving thanks because it's a beautiful day and the mountains are lovely and my family was nice to me. And blah, blah, blah. We are giving thanks in advance for the demonstration of our treatment. And the 5th step, release. The ultimate, release and let it go. Let go and let God. Yeah. Now, of course, there's much more to it. Otherwise, our beautiful people today wouldn't have spent a minimum of 4 years learning it. Okay, that's going to be interesting. Hold on a second. I can do it. Oh, you are my hero. Thank you. I have more heroes today than I know what to do with. I know. I did notice that. Yeah, please. I treated to have lots of men in my center. Seriously, because, thank you. We are kind of we're heavily female, strong feminine. And I wanted to make sure that, this is life is balanced, right? So I really, really worked and treated to have men in my center. Thank you guys. You are an answer to my treatment. So here's the good news. There is good news here. Knowing just this basic stuff can be extremely effective. Already effective, especially when you are coming from that understanding that we're all part of this powerful, all-knowing, ever-present activity of life. Don't you feel empowered? Yes? Okay, come on now. Don't you feel empowered? Yes! So now, the question is, particularly those who know this already, are you using it? Or do you just use it for special occasions? Or do you just use it when you've run out of options? Boy, there's a lot of non-eye contact going on right now. At the conference that I went to earlier this month, Dr. Ken Gordon, who is our spiritual leader, asked us that same question. Why is it that we have this incredibly powerful spiritual tool that is at our disposal, and we only haul it out as a last resort? WTH! For some people, I'm going to give some people the benefit of the doubt. For some people, maybe it's not a habit yet. Maybe you learned about it, it was kind of cool at the time, but you haven't utilized it as a spiritual muscle. And you all know that our muscles need to be exercised in order to be strong. So just like exercise, it is easy to fall back to the old ways unless we use it. And that is the same thing with spiritual mind treatment or prayer. If we don't use it, if we don't continue to strengthen our belief in it, then we either forget it or we find that it's not as effective as we thought it was. Because the fact is, in order to be truly effective, we got to use it. We got to use it. We got to strengthen it. We have to rely on it for more than just special occasions or as a last result. I like this quote by Corrie ten Boom. Is prayer your steering wheel or your spare tire? Yeah, hey? So I have two stories to tell you. I told you I was going to lecture you for a while, and then I was going to tell you some stories. First one involves not one, but two members of our community, Kathy Matthews, sitting right up here, and Willem. I almost call you Willem Dafoe. Willem Van Gogh. So both of these beauties, and I love them both so very much, earlier this year, both of them were in desperate need of hip replacement surgery. Each of them living in pain, their mobility seriously impaired, lots and lots of discomfort, and pretty far down on the list for surgery. You know, we love this healthcare system, and sometimes we end up pretty far down on the list, right? And yet both Kathy and Willem believe in the power of prayer, both doing their own prayer and also asking and reaching out. So in addition to doing their own spiritual work, they both asked our practitioners and our ministers to treat on their behalf. In other words, not only did they strengthen their own belief, but they borrowed somebody else's belief. You with me? It's possible to do. You can borrow somebody else's belief when you're not quite there yet. So what happened, interestingly, they're down on the list, right? As if by magic, they both rose to the top of the list. Not simultaneously, but in a very short period of time. You know that's practically unheard of with an aging baby boomer population, right? The list gets longer, it doesn't get shorter. And both of them, and I have their permission to share this, both of them had almost miraculous surgeries and recoveries. Their doctors cannot believe how far they've come. Kathy is walking on one crutch, and when did you have surgery? 25 days ago, and with a complete hip replacement, and she's walking with just one crutch. How long ago was your surgery? May 24th, and he ran a marathon last week. No, I'm just kidding. I'm sure that's true. Now, you could chalk all of this up to coincidence, or good medical care, absolutely, or voodoo, luck, whatever. But I'm willing to bet that if you asked either one of them if they felt that the power of prayer was part of their astounding success, they would say yes. Yeah, absolutely, Kathy, absolutely. So the second story involves yours truly. Now, some of you know I have been here in Canada for a little over 5 years, and I recently made the decision to apply for permanent residence. Now, I know, I'm excited about it, yeah. Now, in case you're wondering, I am here legally. But permanent residence is just a more secure way of being here legally, all right? It's not citizenship, it's permanent residence. Now, let me first say to all of you, you count your blessings that you were born here, if you were born here and you did not have to go through this process, because it is a process. Let me just give you a for instance. In addition to spending several $1,000s on fees and a consultant, I also had to pay for and go through an immigration medical exam. I had to pay for and take and pass with flying colors, thank you God, an English proficiency test. I'd have been worried if I hadn't done well, wouldn't you? I mean, come on. I had to pay for special recognition of my being an exempt employee. I had to pay for a change in my visa designation from visitor record to a work permit. I had to pay to have my university transcripts transcribed and validated. And the most recent one, I had to pay for an FBI check. And that is just to apply. That is not guaranteed. I don't know yet. Shut up. How far back do they go? No, But you see, I also believe in the power of prayer. And so in addition to my own prayer work, I reached out regularly to our ministers and practitioners, to our board of trustees. I reached out to my colleagues because I understand how powerful this is. And everything was going super smoothly. Considering everything, I mean, and last week, there was a glitch. And if the glitch would not be resolved, then things would not continue to progress. Almost dead in the water. It's based on a point system, and you get certain points for things, right? And we thought that I had enough points, but when we sent the thing in to be evaluated, I didn't have enough points. And when I first heard the news, I said some bad words. As Mark Twain said, under certain circumstances, urgent circumstances, desperate circumstances, profanity provides a relief denied even in prayer. And then I remembered who I am. And I called on the people that I know to speak their word on my behalf. My colleagues, my friends, and, believe it or not, my Facebook community. Because I was in it. Now, how I said earlier, we have the spark of the divine, and sometimes we forget that. And we need to have somebody remember that for us. Well, I was in the thick of it, right? I was saying bad words. So I asked my friends, my colleagues, my Facebook community to please know the truth for me. regarding my application, that it goes through easily, effortlessly, in a timely fashion. In other words, I put my faith in someone else's believing, and then I went about my business. The day after posting on Facebook, there were over 120 likes. If you know Facebook, people like it. There were 100 written affirmations and prayers. And by golly, if my consultant didn't call me 24 hours later and say to me, wow, I just found something that I think is going to give you an extra 200 points. Folks, all I needed was 13 points. And she found 200 for me to move ahead. And I have now received my invitation to apply for permanent residence. Ask me if I believe in the power of prayer. I do. Ask these two if they believe in the power of prayer. Raise your hand if you believe in the power of prayer. I do. You! But folks, the key is you got to use it. Not just for special occasions or when your you-know-what is on the line. You got to use it. So use treatment, use prayer, use affirmations, use positive thinking, use howling at the moon if that works for you. Use whatever it takes. In other words, say your prayers. I love you, and so it is.